ice cold evening in the city that never sleeps. Criminals stalk the streets, and everywhere you looked, it was a war of good versus evil. Will there be a hero to come save the city? Someone on a mission for justice? Stay tuned to find out what the theme is. Yeah, we got some knowledge you can get right here. We're talking about a theme or a big idea. It's a message about life the author is expressing. So here's an example for anyone with questions. Excessive pride leads to a person's demise. Now a few more themes you can try and emphasize. In The Little Prince, I won't keep you guessing. Relationships teach you important lessons. And in Tuck Everlasting, there's that death is a part of the life cycle. Do you get it yet? Many different stories have themes that they share. It could be in this book, in that book, over there. Like in Alice in Wonderland and The Little Prince. Do you know what a theme that they share is? It's that in childhood, you're open-minded and you know things that adults lose sight of. Don't confuse theme with the main idea though. So just in case, let me break it down for you real slow. Main idea is what a text is about mostly, while the theme is more sweeping, so you've got to read closely. Every story has a theme, a universal concept, if you know what I mean. Theme in every story has a theme. Just below the surface, running through it like a stream. Every story has a theme, a universal concept, if you know what I mean. Theme in every story has a theme. Just below the surface, running through it like a stream. Now a writer won't come right out and say what the theme is, but with the character and plot, you don't need to be a genius. Hey, Batman, aka Bruce Wayne, the billionaire, the moonlighting crime fighter who all of the villains fear. But every once in a while, a truly diabolical one comes into town and really puts Batman to the test. The Joker, the Penguin, the Scarecrow, you can guess that one. Every time without fail, it's the good guy, Batman, who prevails. Think about the plot and the characters, heroes, villains. Yup, there it is. Good triumphs over evil. Let's do another, because a text can have more than one theme to discover. Bruce Wayne's a jerk, but Batman's a good guy. So another theme is there's more than meets the eye. Every story has a theme, a universal concept, if you know what I mean. Theme in every story has a theme. Just below the surface, running through it like a stream. Every story has a theme, a universal concept, if you know what I mean. Theme in every story has a theme. Just below the surface, running through it like a stream.
And here we are. This story has many themes, as you can tell. There's always a theme to everything you read, everything you see. Make sure you dig deep. Your story has a theme too. Every story has a theme.
Hi, boys and girls. Miss Sweet here, coming to you with another reading lesson. I hope you are as excited as I am. This week, we are going to be working on summarizing a story and identifying the theme of that story. In grammar, we're also going to be working on synonyms and antonyms. But I hope you're ready because we're going to be reading an amazing book called Henry's Freedom Box. It is a true story from the Underground Railroad. I love history, and I know some of you do too. It seems like a fictional story because it's illustrated, but it's actually non-fiction because it tells a true story. So we're going to be summarizing our story using our strategy. Somebody wanted, but so then. And we're also going to be identifying the theme of this story. What is the moral or life lesson that we can learn from reading this book? So when we're older, we can think back and say, what did that book teach us? I hope you're ready to get started. Let's dive in. Here we are, ready to read our story, Henry's Freedom Box. Henry Brown wasn't sure how old he was. Henry was a slave. Slaves weren't allowed to know their birthdays. What a shame. That must have been a terrible life to lead. Not feeling important enough to know your own birthday. I hope things get better for our friend Henry. Henry and his brothers and sisters worked in the big house where the master lived. Henry's master had been good to Henry and his family, but Henry's mother knew things could change. Do you see those leaves blowing in the wind? They're torn from the trees like slave children are torn from their families. What a hard lesson that was for a young child to have to learn. Unfortunately, it happened in history, and I'm so glad things have changed. One morning, the master called for Henry and his mother. They climbed the wide staircase. The master lay in bed with only his head above the quilt. He was very ill. He beckoned them to come closer. Some slaves were freed by their owners. Henry's heart beat fast. Maybe the master would set him free. But the master said, "You are a good worker, Henry. I am giving you to my son. You must obey him and never tell a lie." Henry nodded, but he didn't say thank you. That would have been a lie. Later that day, Henry watched a bird soar high above the trees. Free bird, happy bird, Henry thought. Henry said goodbye to his family. He looked across the field. The leaves swirled in the wind. How disappointing and saddening that time must have been for them, Henry knowing that he might never see his family again. Henry worked in his new master's factory. He was good at his job. "Do not tear that tobacco leaf," the boss yelled at the new boy. He poked the boy with a stick. If you made a mistake, the boss would beat you. That is a terrible thing to think about. Henry was lonely. One day, he met Nancy, who was shopping for her mistress, and a mistress is a female version of a master. They walked and talked and agreed to meet again. Henry felt like singing, but slaves didn't dare sing in the streets. Instead, he hummed all the way home. Months later, Henry asked Nancy to be his wife. When both their masters agreed, Henry and Nancy were married. Soon, there was a little baby, then another, and another. Henry knew they were very lucky. They lived together even though they had different masters. But Nancy was worried. Her master had lost a great deal of money. "I'm afraid he will sell our children," she said. Henry sat very still. I'm sure he was very distressed at the thought of losing his family. Henry worked hard all morning. He tried to forget what Nancy had said. His friend James came into the factory. He whispered to Henry, "Your wife and children were just sold at the slave market." "No!" cried Henry. Henry couldn't move. He couldn't think. He couldn't work. "Twist that tobacco!" The boss poked Henry. Henry twisted tobacco leaves. His heart twisted in his chest. At lunchtime, Henry rushed to the center of town. A large group of slaves was tied together. The owner shouted at them. Henry looked for his family. "Father, father!" Henry watched his children disappear down the road. Where was Nancy? He saw her the same moment she saw him. When he wiped away his tears, Nancy too was gone. I imagine if I were Henry, I would have felt lost and alone. A terrible way to feel. Henry no longer sang. He couldn't hum. He went to work, and at night he ate supper and went to bed. Henry tried to think of happy times, but all he could see were the carts carrying away everyone he loved. Henry knew he would never see his family again. Many weeks passed. One morning, Henry heard singing. A little bird flew out of a tree into the open sky, and Henry thought about being free. But how? As he lifted a crate, he knew the answer. He asked James and Dr. Smith to help him. Dr. Smith was a white man who thought slavery was wrong. They met early the next day at an empty warehouse. Henry arrived with a box. "I will mail myself to a place where there are no slaves," he said. James stared at the box, then at Henry. "What if you cough and someone hears you?" "I will cover my mouth and hope," Henry said. Dr. Smith wrote on the box, "To William H. Johnson, Arch Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania." Henry would be delivered to his friends in Philadelphia. Then he printed on the crate in big letters, "This side up, with care." This is a very dangerous situation Henry has put himself into. Henry needed an excuse to stay home, or the work boss would think he had run off. James pointed to Henry's sore finger, but Henry knew it wasn't bad enough. He opened a bottle of oil of vitriol. "No!" cried James. Henry poured it on his hand. It burned his skin to the bone. Now the boss would have to let him stay home. Dr. Smith bandaged Henry's hand. They arranged to meet the next morning at 4 o'clock. I think I would now describe him as determined. He is going to overcome and persevere no matter what the cost. The sun was not up yet when Henry climbed into the box. "Ready?" he said. James nailed down the lid. Dr. Smith and James drove to the station. The railway clerk tipped the box over and nailed a paper to the bottom. Dr. Smith begged the clerks to be careful, but they didn't listen. They threw the box into the baggage car. Hours passed. Henry was lifted up and thrown again, upside down. He heard waves splashing. This must be the steamboat headed for Washington, D.C. The ship rode smoothly, but Henry was still upside down. Blood rushed to his head. His face got hot. His eyes ached. He thought his head would burst, but he was afraid to move. Someone might hear him. Have you ever been hanging upside down and your head started to feel that way? I can't imagine being that way for longer than just a short time. "I'm tired of standing," someone said. "Why don't we move that box and sit on it?" said another. Henry held his breath. Could they be talking about his box? Henry was pushed. The box scraped the deck. Now he was on his right side. Now on his left. And suddenly, right side up. Whew, I bet you he felt relieved. "What do you think is in here?" said the first man. "Mail, I guess," said the other. "I am mail," thought Henry, but not the kind they imagine. Henry was carried off the steamboat and placed in a railroad car, this time head up. He fell asleep to the rattling song of the train wheels. I would almost be afraid to fall asleep. I would be afraid I would make some noise. He awoke to loud knocking. "Henry, are you all right in there?" "All right," he answered. The cover was pried open. Henry stretched and stood up. 4 men smiled at him. "Welcome to Philadelphia." At last, Henry had a birthday. March 30th, 1849, his first day of freedom. And from that day on, he also had a middle name. Everyone called him Henry Box Brown. I hope you enjoyed our story. Are you ready to summarize? Because I know I am. All right, boys and girls, today we are going to summarize our story, and we're going to do it using a really easy strategy. Earlier, you saw me say our strategy was somebody wanted, but, so, then. So what I'm going to do is I am going to trace my hand on a blank piece of paper. I would like for you to do this at home as well. So you can pause the video. I'm also going to draw part of my wrist and my arm also. So I'm going to write somebody wanted, but, so, then. And then down here, we're going to identify the theme of our story. So I will let you pause the video for just a moment and get your graphic organizer ready. So when we talk about somebody, that's who our main character is. So who was the somebody in our story? The somebody in our story, well, who was it, guys? Yep, you're exactly right. The somebody in our story was Henry. Well, what did Henry want? He wanted a family. He wanted, but more than anything, from the time he was a little boy, when his master was sick and getting ready to die, all the way until the time he was an adult, he wanted to be free. You're exactly right. But that's where the problem comes in. What was Henry's problem? Henry wanted to be free, but he was a slave. You're exactly right. I'm so glad you remember our story so well. Henry wanted to be free, but he was a slave. And here is where he tries to fix that problem. What did Henry do in order to be free? He wanted to get out of slavery. Let's think back. It was the most important part of our story. It was the solution that could have cost him his life. You're exactly right. He mailed himself. And where did he mail himself? We know that he mailed himself north to Philadelphia. So, what happened when he mailed himself north? Let's go over our summary so far. Henry wanted to be free, but he was a slave, so he mailed himself north. Then, what was the resolution to our story? How did it all end up? Think back. Did he make it north? When he made it there, what happened? Oh, I hear you saying it. He was a free man. And what did he gain? We can even add another detail. What did he get when he was freed? He was a free man with a new birthday. You're exactly right. His new birthday was the first day that he had become free. Now, let's think about the theme of our story. You guys did an amazing job coming up with the summary, but what is the theme? The theme is the moral or a life lesson that we can learn from this story. What is the main thing? Well, we could learn that slavery is wrong. We could learn that sometimes things are unfair, but even a better theme than that. If you want something, you should never, oh, I heard you say it, you're right, never give up. So if you want something, never give up. And What do we call that, boys and girls? It starts with a D when you never give up. You're exactly right. It's called determination. So the theme of this story is if you want something, never give up. You have to find a way in order to get what you want and do it the right way. So look at you guys. You did an amazing job. Somebody wanted, but so then. That is a great strategy to help you find your summary of your book. And then your theme, which is your life lesson, is something that I always like to say, when you're 40 years old, what did that book teach us? Great job summarizing today. Way to go, guys.
Listen, know about the synonyms? They say the same thing again and again and again. They use different words with the same meaning. They might appear in the twilight or evening. Don't be fearful, don't be scared. You should be happy and glad they're here. The team is so large, I'm not lying. Big and gigantic, like a giant or a titan. Use synonyms when you're writing, scribbling, scrawling, jotting, noting. They're hoping, they're wishing, praying that you'll use them instead of saying the same thing with the same words. The same thing with the same words. Their names are printed in the thesaurus, so look around that book and explore it. Synonym that it means the same. So many words, what a synonym. Antonym that it means the opposite. So many words that you have got together. Synonym that it means the same. Okay. So many words, what a synonym. Antonym that it means the opposite. So many words that you have got together. Look, another group, they're known as antonyms. They're my enemy. Now we can't be friends. They don't mean the same thing, they mean the opposite. They pick it up when I'm dropping it. Whenever I feel good, they feel bad. Whenever I'm permanent, they're just a fad. When they come around, I'm up, they're down. I'm flying through the sky, they're digging underground. They're brilliant when I feel stupid. They're useful when I am useless. The far to my near, the slow to my fast. Bravery to my fear, the first to my last. Shoot, I guess day needs night. Synonyms need antonyms, they don't need to fight. So now you know about these groups, you should use both of them when you write, right? Synonym that it means the same. So many words, what a synonym. Antonym that it means the opposite. So many words that you have got together. Synonym that it means the same. Okay. So many words, what a synonym. Antonym that it means the opposite. So many words that you have got together.
We just reviewed what synonyms and antonyms are. It's usually pretty easy to figure out the synonym of a word, but antonyms are sometimes a little harder. So the strategy that I like to use when I think about antonyms, if it is blank, it cannot be blank, because antonyms are not just different, they have to be opposites. So let's think about some examples. If it is the top, it cannot be the bottom, because the top is opposite from the bottom. Let's think of another example. If it is left, it cannot be, oh, you're exactly right. It cannot be right. Let's think of another example. If it is big, it cannot be small. You're exactly right. So when we think about antonyms, the strategy that I like to use is if it is blank, it cannot be blank. I want you to think of my last one. If it is hot, it cannot be, oh, you have it right, cold. If it is hot, it cannot be cold. So we know that these two words are, what did we say those words are that are opposites? You're exactly right. Those words are antonyms. Great job, guys. If you all want to practice your synonyms and antonyms at home, there are several different ways you can do that. You can go to my website at fvsweet.weebly.com. This is Miss Sweet's 3rd grade homepage. You can go to the Reading tab and go down to Synonyms and Antonyms and click. When you go there, there are several videos here that help you with synonyms and antonyms. There are several anchor charts as well to give you some examples. If you look at this button here, when you click on it, it will take you to a synonym antonym game. Now, if you go back to the home page, there are some GIM kits that you can complete for homework. And right there is a synonym antonym GIM kit. So I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you enjoyed our lesson for today. We practiced summarizing, we identified the theme of our story, and we practiced synonyms and antonyms. So I will see you for our next reading lesson next week.